All right, welcome back, everyone. We are here for the full spectrum diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging panel. At Capital One, diversity, inclusion, and belonging are valued at our core, sparking innovation and enabling us to do good for our associates, customers, and our communities. Our panelists today are driving results in key pillars at Capital One's DIB work and impacting our communities. We hope to have a robust dialogue today to share with you the work that we have done in these important areas and also talk about ways we continue to drive this area forward. I have the privilege of working with these two amazing thought leaders in this space. I'd like to introduce Taraceta Richard, Managing Vice President of Diversity, Inclusion, and Belonging at Capital One, and Theresa Bedeau, Vice President of Community Impact and Investment. Taraceta, let's start the conversation with you, if I may. You joined Capital One in 2020, bringing with you over 20 years of experience in diversity and inclusion, organizational effectiveness, operational leadership, and human resources. Quite a packed resume. When you joined, the D&I team added belonging to their title to underscore the team's desired outcome of their work. What has surprised you the most about Capital One's journey in the diversity and inclusion space, and how are we doing?
Thanks, Julie. It's exciting to be here today. I've been looking forward to this conversation. So before I go to what surprised me, I think I want to actually start with the B in DIB and what we actually mean by that, the whole impetus for adding that into our work around diversity and inclusion. And so we think about belonging in terms of two ways. One, it's an entry point into the conversation because every single one of us can relate to a time where we didn't belong. It's a basic human need. We all have that deep desire. And I also think about it as an outcome. It's an outcome that we're driving towards where you feel that you belong. You see yourself reflected. You are thriving and flourishing. And so when I think about that and I reflect on the journey that we've been on, I was thinking about this thing, like what has surprised me? And really, I'd reframe it almost as a validation or clarity in the journey. And so what I've gained clarity around are really, I'd say 3 lessons. One is that our people are our heartbeat. And so we genuinely have people that are committed to this work. They're ready to put their hands to the work. They're ready to go after it. And they're thinking about, how do I make this real? And so the lesson I've walked away with, and it's been a pleasant surprise, and one for me, is that when you get a group of people that are committed to the work, and when you pair that with engaged leaders that are ready to use their power to impact systems, then you are unstoppable. I think the second thing that's really stood out to me is that you have to have intentionality around the actions that you want to take. It can't just be action for action's sake. And so being really clear on your outcomes, especially when you have a company of people that are ready and that are activators that want to go out and make a difference, is really important. And then I'd say the last thing is you got to start, jump into the work. Don't wait for perfection, because if you wait for perfection, we'll still be waiting, right? But start and then listen deeply, learn from that, act and evolve. It's like this cycle. Start, listen, act, learn, repeat.
I love that. It kind of reminds me of the agile work that we have here at Capital One, right? Just start, jump in, start working on it, learn more, and keep moving it forward. So that's awesome. I love that. And you've only been here, a couple years working on that. So talk to me a little bit about our work to advance equity at Capital One. That's such an important element in today's space.
Yeah, it's so true. It is an important element. And for me, it is the pathway for how we actually achieve belonging. So if I think about the fact that belonging is an outcome that we're driving towards, then what's our role in that and how do we activate around it? We have to focus on creating the conditions for belonging to be true. And the pathway to that, if belonging, then equity. And so when I think about what equity is and our work around equity, it is deeply understanding experiences, the fact that we're starting from different spaces, that there are different systemic things that are impacting, systemic things that are impacting how we're able to equally thrive and flourish in this world. We start from that space and then we get to work. And so when I think about our work around equity, it's really driven by that. It's driven by that understanding. And it's looking at how do we make really intentional commitments that guide how we go after this work and how we create equal opportunity for all. And the recognition of the fact that the pathway to that is really through equity. And so it is engaging our leaders. It is working with our teams, like our supplier diversity team and organization, our community impact team. It is a full company effort to ensure that we are actually relentlessly in pursuit of this.
I love that. And I know, Theresa, we're going to come to you because I know we've got a question for you about equity as well. So, but before we get there, I'm going to ask one more question to Taraceta, and then we're going to jump over. So talk to me about how is Capital One excelling then in the DIB, diversity, inclusion, and belonging space? Yeah, how do you think we're excelling there? I know you have some examples of things you think that we're doing well. I know we can always improve, but.
Yeah, it's such a great question around how are we excelling? And I think it goes back to our starting point. So the starting point is a commitment around an authentic journey. Our goal is not necessarily to be the loudest in this space. It is to do the work, and it is to be real and authentic and committed in how that work comes to life. So I think about a few things. One is, how do we engage in compelling conversations that not only inspire us, but that challenge us, that help us to look soberly at who we are and how we are showing up in this world, how we are contributing to a more equitable company and a more equitable society. And then really from those compelling conversations that inspire us, that challenge us, that invite us into the work, how do we then think about what the roles are of leaders? Leaders play a huge role in this space. And so recognizing that as a leader, you have power. And how are you using that power? Are you using it for good? Are you using it to shape systems and create the conditions and create an environment where people can really thrive? One of the things that we've really gone after that I'm proud of is an executive education approach that is driving those compelling conversations, that is looking at helping us to understand not only what we see present day, but what's the history that has gotten us to this point? Do we understand what different dynamics are that are in play? Do we understand that the role that we've played in that as a financial services industry? Do we understand how that impacts different demographic groups and how that contributes to what we see today? And through that educational approach, that development approach, are we driving the right conversations that then shift our thinking and help us to shape a different reality? So that's one of the things that we've kicked off in the last 2 years. When we get to the summer of this year, we will have talked to you, and all of our executives will have gone through this experience. And the question becomes, how do you sustain, right? We're adding people daily. And so ensuring that we have a really strong, sustainable approach. So whenever a new leader joins our organization, they have a way to be able to engage in this. I think the other piece has been around our focus in on expanding how we think about talent. Where are the places that we're going to attract talent to the organization? How are we thinking about that? How are we investing in our pipelines? And so looking at the associates that are here today, how are we creating opportunity and pathways for growth and development in the organization from the most junior levels all the way to the most senior levels, and really being deeply engaged in that work. And then it comes to partnerships that we have with our teams across the organization. I know we'll get a chance to talk a little bit more around what that looks like, but how are we showing up not only internally, but what does it look like to show up within the communities that we serve and to really contribute to having healthy communities, healthy businesses, thriving communities, and thriving businesses as we move forward, and being really intentional in that space.
Yeah, I love that. I'm a recipient or see a lot of that going on within the company, and it's just been amazing to watch as that has unfolded. So great. I love that. And a little, I'm going to move over to Theresa now. Theresa, your work at Capital One is based on your commitment to designing community responsive small business programming. It has a focus on inclusive economic development. And I've seen that as we've worked together over the years. And it's just, I love to see how that is unfolded and continues to unfold. Can you please talk a little bit about Capital One's commitment to advancing equity in our communities and what that means to you?
Thank you, Julie. So first of all, thank you for the opportunity to speak here on this topic, and to CVMSDC for hosting us. And, you know, I remember when I first joined Capital One and how inspired I was about the possibility of expanding opportunity and advancing equity through this work, through supporting small businesses. I grew up in Manhattan's Washington Heights neighborhood, where many neighborhood businesses were owned and operated by my neighbors. If you remember seeing In the Heights over the summer, it was pretty much like that. It was so much fun. And if I was ever hungry, I knew that my friend's neighbor owned a pizza shop, or if I was short and change, that, you know, I could still purchase groceries at the corner store because they knew my family. I also knew I couldn't stray from my usual route because my mother would hear about it. And this is way before cell phones and social media was popular. But I also saw how business ownership opened up economic pathways for families. And I strongly felt that everyone should have access to business ownership as a viable pathway towards socioeconomic mobility. So that just experience in my life and growing up has really shaped the way that I approach the work, and really how proud I am to be part of this work at Capital One. I understood back then just how much access to, you know, fill in the blank was not equitably available to everyone, and how often it was by systemic design that people were excluded from that opportunity or had to overcome hurdles to get theirs, right? So I think about the last 2 years in particular, and how much a light has been shined on just the shun on the deep inequities experienced by so many people across this country. And yet it has also presented us with an opportunity to do things differently. I can stand here and really tell you that I am proud of Capital One's commitment to advancing equity. The way that Capital One approaches community investments is really grounded in being locally responsive and co-designing solutions to long-standing systemic barriers. And what that means is that we have to lean into learning from and partnering with the community, its leaders and its advocates, those that are closest to the challenges that we're trying to solve for. They are part of this broader ecosystem and nearest to the solutions. So again, you know, leveraging the resources and the scale and the size of Capital One to bring all those components together and design equitable solutions. It's really about understanding the challenges at the root and working together to remove those impediments. We believe that disparities in housing, education, and employment, among many other key factors, creates inequities in personal financial health and the overall well-being of an individual. And just to give you an example of how we're advancing equity, we recently partnered with the Association for Enterprise Opportunity to launch a grant fund for Black-owned small businesses across the country. The demand for capital, which we know is a big barrier for businesses, was overwhelming and underscored just how critical the need is. Our teams were very intentional about designing a simple application, only collecting what was necessary to process that application, and ultimately trusting small business owners to put the investment where they felt they needed it the most. No questions, right? And every part of that program was designed and evaluated through an equity lens. How are we removing barriers to facilitate access? And if not, what do we need to do to expand access? That also means looking at our own internal processes and how we design programs. We selected a partner that was, you know, predominantly led by the community we were aiming to serve. They truly understood the challenges and the needs on the ground. They were an established, trusted partner in the community, and we were sure that the resources were going to get where they were needed the most. So, you know, while we acknowledge that there are a lot of hurdles to overcome, the work is really intentional and by design and cross-collaborative. We have to bring diverse voices to the table to solve these challenges together.
Yeah, that's an amazing program. Now, has that launched that you just described, or are we still building that out? I'm so
We're
excited
always
about that.
learning. Yes, Julie, we're
Yeah.
always learning. That is the Capital One way. You know, we launched
Yeah.
the program, and quickly we're so eager to understand, like, where are these business owners coming from? What is the need that they have? What more can we provide to really support their growth? Is there an opportunity to connect across the enterprise to show up authentically? And so I feel like we have this opportunity with a small group of business owners to let them guide us on the type of relationship that they want to have with their financial partner. And then how might we show up authentically to really meet their needs?
That's amazing, because that's new, but yet back in 2020, we had this impact initiative. There was also an amazing outreach, amazing opportunity. Talk a little bit about that. I know that we've in supplier diversity been a part of that, but can you share some of that work with the group here as well?
Oh, absolutely. It was launched in October 2020, which already feels like so many ages ago. And the Impact Initiative was honestly a natural evolution of Capital One's journey. At Capital One, we embrace the idea that by advancing economic and social opportunities in the communities where we operate, we can advance business outcomes while doing good and helping people thrive. Our mission to change banking for good inspired the launch of the Impact Initiative, which has three main focus areas: advocating for an inclusive society, building thriving communities, and creating financial tools that enrich lives. So the Impact Initiative initially was fueled by an initial $200 million multi-year commitment in community grants to catalyze economic growth in low moderate income communities and help close the gap in equity and opportunity. So, you know, when I think about the Impact Initiative and how might that be different, you know, is this another corporate commitment? I really have found myself remembering that Capital One is a relatively young company. It was only founded in the mid-90s and still founder-led. And core to its formation was the belief that no one should be locked out of the financial system. And that's really significant. Like, I just want to take a moment to absorb that, because I think it's important to acknowledge that from its very first days, the mission to advance equity has always been there. It's always been in the core. And so the Impact Initiative just made it publicly known, like, no, we are here. This is part of our enterprise work, our core business model, that we show up and we advance equity for everyone because we all benefit in the end.
Yeah. So that's the Impact Initiative. And the program that you talked about before that, what was the name of that program? The one that you...
The grant program for Black-owned businesses with AEO.
Yeah, right. Got it. So I think you touched on this, the importance of Capital One's commitment for advancing socioeconomic, that's a big word, mobility in our communities. I mean, I think that's kind of the crux of what you're talking about then, right? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I love this question, Julie, because socioeconomic mobility can mean a lot of things to a lot of people. And, you know, I very briefly mentioned earlier how I saw business ownership change the lives for people around me. I know that for my own family, it provided an additional income stream that put me and my brothers through college. Everyone I knew around me has some sort of hustle or some sort of entrepreneurial endeavor, and everyone had their own reasons for pursuing entrepreneurship. And at the end of the day, when I reflect on this, I realized that people simply wanted more control over their lives, to either live more financially secure lives or to advance their opportunities for socioeconomic mobility. People ultimately, they want to be included. They want to feel like they're part of this larger social fabric, they're part of this larger economy. And so socioeconomic mobility needs to start from a place of inclusion. We cannot ignore the urgency of this issue when I think about this moment in time right now, while we're living through a time where companies must take a stand on critical issues facing our communities and to advocate for equal treatment and opportunity for groups and individuals in order to drive meaningful change. You know, I think a lot about our work in small business, and one of the areas where we see the largest inequities is in wealth. And when we look at the racial wealth gap in particular, when you look at Black families, and if the racial wealth gap had been closed 20 years ago, the US GDP would have benefited $16 trillion. Trillion. I mean, that's just a gigantic number, and it's a major economic opportunity loss. Other estimates say that $5.9 trillion in lost revenue from underrepresented Black-owned business owners, simply by not being able to tap into their potential, their economic power. Access to those resources and capital has not been equitably distributed, especially to BIPOC communities. So just imagine if these investments and resources were more equitably dispersed, how much more the economy as a whole would benefit.
That's wow, with a T, trillion. That's incredible. Yeah. So let me open it up then to both of you. So we've heard kind of about the community impact and the associate impact, and in supplier diversity. We kind of touch on both of those, but I'd love to hear from both of you. Really, at Capital One, we talk about a responsibility to create more equitable, just, and inclusive workplace and community. Basically, what we've been talking about. How does supplier diversity fit into Capital One, into the DIB initiative? I'd love for you to share kind of your thoughts on that, and I'll let either one of you jump in first.
Yeah, I can totally jump in there. First, can I just have a pause moment, Theresa? Everything that you just shared, yes, all day. I told you all earlier that we have amazing people that we get to work with, and this is just an example with Julie and with Theresa. And what I think about here is this is a full company effort. This is full company work. And so when you think about the integration of supplier diversity with diversity and inclusion and belonging, if it's not integrated, we are doing it wrong. And so I think it is critically important that we are working in tandem together in this. I love the theme that you talked about, Theresa, around socioeconomic mobility. That is the definition of thriving, right? Of flourishing. When I think about the outcome of belonging, that is a true measure. Do you have the mobility and the agency to be able to live the life that you desire to live? And businesses, healthy businesses, thriving businesses are a pathway to that in so many ways. And so I think it absolutely has to be integrated. And we have a rally cry, which is, are we clear? Are we connected? And are we integrated? And I think that really shows up here. The other piece that really stands out to me are a couple of principles I feel like are forming from this conversation. One is proximity, and how close are we to what is actually happening, the recognition of the fact that we don't actually move through this world in a vacuum, absent of all the things that we're experiencing in life. So how do we get proximate to what is actually happening in the world? And then another principle of co-design and co-creation. And I see that day in and day out happening in our supplier diversity team and our community impact and investment team around how are we working directly with business owners, with community leaders, with community organizations, with leaders within our organization to really bring that to life. And so I think that integration is critical. It's a priority for us, and it's a principle for the way that we work.
That's absolutely right, Teresita. Thank you. And I have the pleasure of working with Julie and Ruben a lot more closely over the past couple of months to align our strategic efforts. And an example of how we get closer to the community and how we create programmings to be responsive is a partnership that we formed with WeBank. Through a competitive grant process, they received a $500,000 grant to launch the Thriving with Capital One program, providing information on emerging topics relevant to small businesses through various digital formats, and hopefully in person again once we resume to in-person meetings. And so that is an example of where multiple teams came together with a trusted partner to identify, well, what is the need that you're seeing right now from small business owners, and how might we be able to deliver resources and information and connect them to broader opportunities. Another example in our partnership with supplier diversity is the mentoring program. Mentoring for Diverse Suppliers program launched in 2021 in 3 major Capital One markets. I know that the supplier diversity team worked with our team as well to identify associates that were interested in supporting business owners and in identifying community partners and to connect opportunities where it made sense. You know, if there was a business owner that was looking for financing, like what are the resources available to them in that community, which also includes our community CDFI partners who provide a range of financial products and services that a lot of people may not be familiar with. And so it's important for us to continue to build together and to also evaluate the impact and the work that we're doing so that we can constantly build on our learnings and adjust to the changing environments.
Yeah, definitely. And I know from the supplier diversity perspective, we have grown our spend significantly in the past year even. And that certainly we can't do on our own, right? It's a function of the lines of business, but I'm looking at our 2 key partners certainly here that help spread the message, and together we are growing the supplier diversity aspect of it through community and getting the word out about the need to integrate, grow the capabilities of these businesses and provide more opportunities for them to get business with Capital One. So the partnership has just been amazing.
And there was so much that happened organically, Julie. I mean, I think about the time that we spent creating lists and directories of diverse business owners, and associates were so eager to support local businesses. And I remember getting on the Slack channel and just sharing my favorite business in Brooklyn and learning about a business in Richmond and in California. So there were a lot of things and opportunities that associates across the company and our leaders were really excited about supporting businesses and then working with them. I know you recently partnered with a graduate of one of your training programs to build a learning management system, a much needed resource, and how wonderful it was that you were able to contract with a participant from your program to be able to now serve more entrepreneurs through that platform while giving someone a meaningful opportunity to grow their business.
I love that, Theresa. If I could just layer in one more thing, I want to make one more connection point, and it is like the power of activating your workforce in this work. And I think that's one of the beautiful ways that we've been able to partner together within supplier diversity and within community impact and investment, is actually taking the skills and capabilities we have in our workforce to be able to serve businesses. And being able to tap into that through our mentorship programs, through our pro bono programs to work with businesses and nonprofits, et cetera, to be able to share those skills in a way that advances. So I think about partners in good. Our mission is to change banking for good. We are partners in good. And I think for everyone that's here, I imagine a world where as corporations, we lock arms to be partners for good for a more equitable society. And I think that's the work that we're doing.
I love that term, partners for good. And it also presents like an opportunity to learn more about each other. And, through the mentorship program, I also learned that a lot of our associates had entrepreneurial experiences, either in running their own business or growing up in a business. And that was something that was really important for business owners to feel like they were able to connect to. So not only were they connecting with an associate within our company, but another person that was connected to a small business. And a lot of us have those moments, and maybe, we may not show them up in our day-to-day work, but having space to express ourselves, a part of ourselves in our work, is also another way that we create pathways to belonging. See, Taraceta, I'm listening. Picking up.
Well, and I think that's expanded certainly through the business resource groups, right, that we have. Another opportunity for people to show up as themselves and find opportunities to share that. And whether it's turning back into the mentoring opportunities that we provide or other pro bono work, and connecting with others within the company and within the community. And that's what I have found through the supplier diversity work. It's not just in the procurement aspect, but again, resonates across the entire community of Capital One and then back into the places where we live. All right, so we've made great progress. We've talked about some really amazing things that Capital One has done. What is left to be done? What are some challenges, opportunities out there that we're still looking into, or that we'd like to share with folks on this event to consider or think about?
I'm happy to jump in here, Julie, because the one thing for sure that I know is that the world will continue to change and evolve. And when I think about the people that are perhaps the best positioned to design solutions to those problems or to those challenges, they're entrepreneurs. They're the small business owners, whether you're the mom and pop shop or the home-based childcare provider or the high-growth startup company looking to innovate and solve for challenges that may have been overlooked or underinvested in your communities. And so when we think ahead, it's really how are we showing up to strengthen that broader ecosystem of support for small businesses in the near term and in the long term, because it also is an opportunity to build wealth. It's an opportunity to think about, how might I leave a legacy behind, either for, my family, but for my community and potentially their workers. What are some, different business models perhaps that would help me, weather through, the next disruption or the next pandemic or the next environmental crisis. I think we have a moment here where we have witnessed the resilience, the ingenuity of small businesses, and we also acknowledge that we live in a really diverse country. And that is our global advantage here. And how are we going to tap into that to really solve for the problems and challenges in the future and really position ourselves on a path that perhaps maybe we haven't imagined? And I think that starts by having these types of conversations, being really honest with ourselves and dreaming big and really just putting in the work to test and learn and figure out who do I need to connect with and how do we move the needle here. And oftentimes we have the solutions or the ideas, and it's really just about leveraging the resources and the power to bring them to light.
I love that, Theresa. I think you're so right. The world is actively evolving and changing. And so I think the challenge we have before us is one that our work is not done. This is generational, long game work. And so we have to constantly be in that space of how are we evolving? How are we thinking about technology, flexibility, people, adapting? And I think we are in a moment of where we can really pause and look back and reflect over the last 2 years. To your point, Theresa, to say what have we learned? What can we carry forward? Where do we need to focus? And the last thing I'll say from a challenge perspective is that the war for talent is real, right? We've all experienced the great resignation, the great reshuffling, the great fill in the blank. And so as I think about that, our work around people, how do we really tap into people from a diversity and inclusion and belonging perspective? It's going to be a competitive edge for us if we're able to really do that. And so I implore corporations, ourselves, others, businesses to really think about that and lock arms and how we do that together.
Yeah. To the point about thinking back what has happened over the past 2 years and what have we learned, maybe we can think about what problem may be on the horizon in the next year, but more importantly, how can we prepare ourselves for the problem in 5 years that we don't know what it is, but how can we take what we've learned about how we dealt with the past 2 years and be prepared to deal with whatever it is we don't know that's coming, other than the fact we know that something else is coming, right? So what muscles do we start exercising and figuring out how to grow those? And so Theresa, Taraceta, great questions and thoughts that we need to find the people and the practices to start down that road for sure. Let me, let me put it out to folks. If you have questions, please put them in the Q&A. I don't think there's any out there at this point, but I encourage you, if you have anything specific, we can open up the floor at this point. So maybe I'll ask if there's any, any last words that you have. I know Dominique is going to join us in a minute, and that'll give people to, last thought, add a question into the Q&A, and we can come back to those. But any last thoughts for Theresa or Taraceta? I know I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. So
thank you, Julie. So have I. I'll just say that I'm ultimately really optimistic. I just don't feel how we could have gone through the past few years not changed. And really, I'll speak for myself, just have a deep desire to really connect at a human level in a way that perhaps I took for granted before. But then when you realize that you're locked in your apartment with your family for how many days, you really start to appreciate the little things and feel immense gratitude. And so I hope that we do carry that forward. I'm optimistic that we will, and that will positively influence the way that we approach our work and the way that we approach our partnerships and supporting our communities and helping people to live the lives that they desire.
Yeah, I think I would just in final thoughts play off of something you just said, Julie, and really in this whole conversation, you mentioned people and you mentioned practice. And I think the only other thing I would layer into that is system. So I think about people. This is about people. Theresa, to your point, it's human-centered work. And so how do we lock arms to do this in a way where we are able to thrive individually and collectively and truly flourish? I think about practice, getting down to behaviors and sharing. Forums like this are so important to be able to do that. We don't win if we go after this by ourselves, right? And there's an African proverb that talks about, if you want to go fast, go alone. You want to go far, you go together. And so when I think about that, that's our work, to do this together. And then systems. This is about systems. There are systems that we have to dismantle, that we have to reimagine, that we have to construct anew to actually go towards that thriving and flourishing of us individually and collectively. And that's our work.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Amazing. I feel so privileged to have been able to share this time with you. Thank you for all of that. Let's bring on Dominique. And I know she, like I said, wanted to say a few words. So
I'm glad we cut this part in because you all we're going to go far together. Capital One and CVMSDC, we're going to go far together. And you ladies can just drop the mic. Absolutely. This session was phenomenal. And what I'm going to do is to make sure that the recording goes to all of our CPOs that are on the CPO panel, because they need to understand the roots of what we're talking about. All this time I've been in this position for 3 years, I thought Capital One just had really great, smart, compassionate people, right? But it's so much more than that. You just explained that, Theresa. It's built into the fiber of who you are, right? Equity is a part of Capital One's foundation. And that makes the difference from the top on down. And it just verbiates throughout the whole entire organization, which makes this session so fabulous that you can talk about the work that you're doing, the growth in the community. You touched on all of my keywords: intentionality, courage. We can't do anything without courage, right? Courage to have those conversations, authenticity, being authentic in everything. We have to bring our whole selves to work and show up. And then the most important thing is the economic imperative here, right? You all understand that, changing the life of one MBE, one business owner, that changes the community, right? Their kids can now go to college, right? They can change the next generation. So you get that, but we have to get all of our corporations to the same level. There was a panel that was done, or a study that was done with Supplier IO, and they said there's 100-year wealth gap in America, right? It's going to take 100 years for us to catch up. And when there's another study that says it's going to take 300 years. But if every company were to increase their spend just 1% each year for 15 years, we could close that wealth gap in 15 years and recover those trillions of dollars that Theresa talked about, right? So we have to be intentional. We have to be courageous, and we have to have these conversations and have it just permeate throughout the entire corporation from the top down. So thank you, ladies. Julie, phenomenal job pulling this panel together and moderating it. So I didn't even know these ladies before today, and I am just so happy to have met you, and we're going to continue this work and go far together.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you to Taraceta and Theresa. Thanks for hopping in, Dominique, for that. And so we will close this out. We will then take another break.
Yes.
I'm looking at my notes.
Yeah, we're going to go to break, and we're going to come back at 1:55. That's my cue there. Thank you so much.
All right,
We'll be back at 1:55. Thank you, ladies. When we come back at 1:55, Julie will be up to introduce the next commercial, another MBE that you have supported. Also a winner from yesterday. He was our Tier 2 winner, award winner on yesterday. So stay tuned, come back at 1:55. And then the next panel later on this afternoon will be our national CPO panel, which is the first time ever that we're doing this. So Taraceta, Theresa, Julie, thank you so much. Let's take a quick break and we'll be back soon.